Were someone to carry out a survey today into the most well-known title from Germany's filmmaking history, Metropolis would certainly win hands down. Yet had critics at the time been asked to bet on which German film would be remembered some 70 or 80 years after its launch, none would have put so much as a penny on it. It would appear that it is the very contradictory and inconsistent nature of this film that made it such a flop in the 1920s, is the reason for its consistent up-to-dateness. How did it happen? How did German cinema come to Metropolis?
The emergence of German cinema following World War I was marked by another film.
The writers intended the film to be a kind of reckoning with the autocracy of Wilhelminian Germany. The collapse of which allowed German cinema to blossom for the first time.
Der Kaiser hat abgedankt. Und seine Freunde sind verschwunden. Über die Jahre hat das Volk auf der ganzen Linie gesiegt. Das Alte und Morsche, die Monarchie ist zusammengebrochen. Es lebe das Neue, es lebe die Deutsche Republik.
The collapse of traditional social values released energies, which now flowed into the new art. Before the war, the path towards the aesthetic formation of German cinema was being laid by Expressionism in literature and the arts.
By the painters of the Bridge in Dresden. By the Blue Rider in Munich. By Georges Grosz in Berlin.
Expressionism in art and literature was followed
by Expressionism in the theatre. It was followed by Expressionist architecture, initially just designs. Followed by
cinema. Metropolis was the last Expressionist film, Caligari the first one. Caligari is, above all, the work of painters Hermann Warm, Walter Reimann and Walter Röhrig, writers Karl Mayer and Hans Janowitz, and actors Werner Krauss and Konrad Veidt. The architect Hans Pölzig built the ghetto in Der Golem. Architects, painters, theatre people and writers were all strongly drawn to the medium of film. Films seemed to offer the opportunity to counteract the division between progressive elitist art and reactionary mass entertainment. Theatre director Karl-Heinz Martin, set designer Robert Nepach and the actor Ernst Deutsch made a movie from Georg Kaiser's play From Morning Until Midnight, which, by the way, was the first German black and white film. All others had been coloured. The painter Walter Ruckmann called his abstract or absolute film Light Play Opus 1, 2, 3 and 4.
The creation of these films at a time other than this would have been impossible. The Marx devaluation enabled the German industry to sell its films cheaply abroad. It also made the German market uninteresting for imports. 400, 500, 600 films were now being produced in Germany every year.
An unprecedented chance for all manner of both trash and art. The first films to achieve international standing are by Ernst Lubitsch. He too came from the theatre, from Max Reinhardt. He swapped the theatre for the cinema. another student of Reinhardt's who had enjoyed a friendly relationship with the Expressionists before the war, Friedrich Wilhelm Murnau. Next to Caligari, his Nosferatu plays a major role in establishing prestige for Germany's cinema in its arch-enemy's capital, Paris. Then Paris raves about another German film, Der müde Tod, Weary Death, the film by Viennese-born Fritz Lang.
The painter Lang, during a leave from the front, started writing screenplays. He got his first screen credit for Hilde Warren and Death. During a sick leave, Lang also appeared on stage as an actor.
Und da sah mich Erich Pommer und wir kamen auf Film zu sprechen und Pommer mochte die Sachen, die mir vorschwebten und er engagierte mich dann als Dramaturg. Ich ging nach Berlin und arbeitete dort zuerst als Dramaturg.
For Erich Pommer's production company, Dekla, 7 films for which he had written the screenplay were premiered in 1919.
Mir gefielen nicht unbedingt die Sachen, die ich dann sah, wie meine Filme inszeniert wurden. Und als ich dann einen Film schrieb, den die Leute, also Dekla Bioskop, sehr gerne haben wollten, der hieß Halbblut, sagte ich, ja, ich verkaufe Ihnen den Film, wenn ich Regie führen könnte.
During the inflation years, Lang makes film after film after film.
In dieser Zeit gab es ein Plakat in Berlin. Berlin, dein Tänzer ist der Tod.
Der müde Tod. Artistic prestige for Lang came with his 8th film. Death itself is featured as architect, narrator and director. It has built a wall with neither doors nor windows. The young woman, Lil Dagova, whose lover has been taken away by death, sees in her dreams a gap opening in the wall. Only in death does she find her way back to her lover. After the fairy tale, a detective novel.
Dr. Mabuse, der Spieler, ein Bild der Zeit und Inferno, Menschen der Zeit. Dr. Mabuse ist das Prototyp dieser Zeit. Er ist ein Spieler. Er spielt Karten, er spielt Roulette und er spielt mit Menschen. Er spielt mit ihren Schicksalen.
Mabuse too is a producer and is himself a part of his production. Mabuse has no face, he is an array of masks.
The actor playing him, Rudolf Klein-Rogge, was married to Thea von Harbu, screenwriter at Dekla. It was there she and Lang met. They became a couple. Shortly after the start of Dr. Mabuse, the director and the writer married.
She is involved in all his films from 1920 to 33. Lang's supporters always held Harbu responsible for the trash and clichés in his films. Lang always defended her. They were in agreement. For them, the newspaper novel was as valuable as fairy tales and legends.
Just think about the brutality, barbarity and crime accumulated in the most charming of German fairy tales, Lang wrote.
And in German legends, Lang filmed Die Nibelungen, first film Siegfried. For her, writes Thea von Harbu, this was not the song of loyalty, but a tale of deceit and betrayal, murder and revenge, blame and penance, in pitiless chains. Second film, Kriemhild's Revenge.
Fritz Lang during the making of the film. The Burgundians are coming to celebrate Midsummer's Night in Etzel's banqueting hall. A Burgundian comes with a grave message.
For Lang, this presented both another architectural dream and nightmare. The strictly ordered system at the Burgundian court in the first part is answered in the second with the earthy shapes of the castle of the Huns. When at the end Etzel's castle is smoke and flames, one does not expect a ruin. The flames and the smoke are themselves moving architecture. As the film premieres, the post-war period is at an end. The mark has regained its stability, the laws of the marketplace are back in effect. In the arts, new objectivity is replacing expressionism. The heyday of inflation-driven cinema is over. So too the self-sufficiency of German filmmaking. The Universum Film AG, in short UFA, has developed into Germany's most powerful film company. But now Hollywood is making huge efforts to get a foothold in the German market. For a loan of 17 million marks, UFA agrees to reserve half of all its cinema performances for films produced by Paramount and Metro-Goldwyn, and to grant these two companies the US rights of its own films. The Paar-UFA-Met agreement, which would also decide the fate of the next Lang von Harbu film.
The screenplay is written during a holiday in June 1924. UFA publicly announces the project in July. Filming is scheduled to start in the autumn. But first, Lang and Pommer sail to America on the steamer named Deutschland. Also on board, the architect Erich Mendelssohn. Mendelssohn speaking about Lang. Apart from his monocle and other Viennese paraphernalia, he is a thoughtful, active, and firmly daring person.
Harbour entrance, Mendelssohn writes,
Turns, spatial cataract, spatial battle, endless lush of victory.
Mendelssohn calls his journey a voyage of discovery for optics and mind.
The city fills with energy during the day. At night it bubbles with life, in a web of vehicle lights, in the bright calling of the billboards, in the vertical heights of the skyscrapers.
A photo by Lang. He would later claim that it was New York's skyscrapers that provided him with the inspiration for Metropolis.
I saw the buildings like a vertical curtain, opalescent and very light, filling the back of the stage, hanging from a sinister sky, in order to dazzle, to diffuse, to hypnotize.
From New York, Lang and Pommer traveled to Hollywood, visiting studios, studying special effects, purchasing cameras. Thea von Harbu at the same time is writing the novel and screenplay. The novel is serialized in a magazine from August the 26th onwards, before being released as a book.
Announced on several occasions, delayed again and again, filming eventually begins on the 22nd of May 1925. Filming takes place on the premises and in the studios belonging to UFA in Neubabelsberg and the Zeppelinhalle at Staaken near Berlin. Filming continues until the end of October 1926, 310 shooting days and 60 nights. Instead of the planned budget of 1.5 million marks, the film's final cost is reported to have been 6 million marks.
Metropolis begins as an abstract animation film. The film's title is created from surfaces and lines and forms the bridge to the graphic design of the city mountains. Animated drawings are followed by animated models and then documentary shots. Metropolis, the last expressionist film, is also the first new objectivity film.
Reviewing the film, young Louis Buñuel wrote, "Cinema is being used as a faithful interpreter, serving the boldest dreams of architecture."
Several city areas, vertically structured, can be identified. The upper city consists of high-rise buildings, intersected by railways, road traffic systems, and aircraft, and is crowned by the multi-story new Tower of Babel. In his first design, Erich Kettelhut saw the medieval cathedral in the centre of the city, over which towered modern skyscrapers. In a revised second design, the cathedral's place has been taken by the new Tower of Babel, whose top floor was envisaged as a pentacle-shaped aerodrome. The Club of the Suns forms an independent area in the upper city, a design by Kettelhut, with its stadium, and with the Eternal Gardens, the playground of the gilded youth of Metropolis. Two alien elements in the modern upper city are Rotwang's old house and the Gothic cathedral. Somewhat distant, the Yoshiwara, the city's red light district. Further down and accessed using steps, the machine area, including the M, the Moloch machine, the Paternoster machine, as it was called in the novel, and the Heart machine, the city's energy centre. Below this, again connected to the upper floors by stairs, elevators and shafts, are the ancient catacombs, with a kind of crypt at their centre. Yet the buildings in Metropolis insinuate neither an intrinsic whole nor a unified world. Instead of three-dimensional buildings, just sketches of non-executed architecture. Indeed, not even intended to be executed. Fantastic imaginary architecture.
I am living, Lang said, through my eyes.
The camera, for Lang, is no longer an apparatus for passively recording mere actions. The camera, by moving slowly towards Gustav Frohlich, expresses Mary's tender attentiveness. Together with Freda's hand, the camera reaches out for Mary's scarf. Behind the camera, Karl Freund. At Lang's request, Pommer had purchased 2 Mitchell cameras while visiting Hollywood, the first of their kind to be used in Germany. Here you can see them. Karl Freund is beside the right one, and Gunter Rittau next to the left one, the 2 cameramen. Between them, their visiting Hollywood colleague Charles Roscher. Another camera to be used on the Metropolis set was the Stachov Filmer, a German-made light metal camera. This panoramic shot from the scene in the Eternal Gardens was taken with a debris camera.
It was made, Rittau wrote, with the help of a small model in the form of a painted backdrop. Because this model had to be photographed from very close up, the camera could not be allowed to move. So we moved the model past the front of the camera instead.
The debris in front of the model, with Rittau on the left, and Kettelhut, who created the relief picture. Seeing with devices is the central topic in the scene with the television telephone. Seeing and showing merge into one.
Günter Rittau described this as an interesting problem. It was solved by projecting the image of the Foreman Groth backwards onto the TV screen using a projector, before filming this with the camera positioned in front of it. The projector and camera were phase connected to ensure they worked at the same speed.
The Tower of Babel at Night, a trick tableau by Erich Kettelhut.
He wrote, "On strong cardboard, I drew 2 pictures of 60 by 40 centimeter format in the same naturalistic and minutely detailed manner as would be produced by photography. My range of shadows stretched from black to mid-grey. Only the constantly illuminated windows were given a lighter shade. If I wanted to depict a beam of light moving across the front of a building, I would have to erase, millimetre for millimetre, the same amount of shading from one side as I added to the other. The picture would then be exposed and the process repeated until the beam of light disappeared completely from the picture screen. And so I had to make around 1,000 individual images.
25 images for every second of the film. So too can it be imagined how from Kettelhut's drawing of daybreak the moving image of the city mountains resulted. Frame by frame shooting was one of 3 special effect processes used in the making of Metropolis. Lang had seen this in Hollywood.
The set for the main shopping street combined 2- and 3-dimensional presentation. A relief model with painted background, the building in the foreground at a scale of 1:16 to the simulated heights, a painting of the new Tower of Babel in the background at a scale of 1:100, 3.5 meters representing 350. For filming the shots of the traffic on the roads of the upper city, they used 300 tiny model cars, each of which had to be moved forward a few millimeters for each frame.
How did the M machine change into the Moloch?
Using a combination of the Schüftan process and sliding mirrors, writes Kettelhut, the Moloch head, which was positioned opposite the M machine, blended into the machine, with the image appearing from top to bottom.
The Schüftan mirror trick process, the second special effect method used in Metropolis. Eugene Schüftan was a painter and architect and Hans Pölzig assistant at the Berlin Academy of the Arts.
Ich bin zum Film gekommen eigentlich durch das Verfahren, weil mich das Bild in der Bewegung sehr interessiert hat. Damals hatte man bloß stillstehende Bilder und nicht das Bild in der Tiefe. Das ist ein Hauptteil meines Verfahrens, weil der Spiegel in der Tiefe gebraucht wird.
Schüftan's mirror trick process enabled the combined use of models and real scenery. Here between the model buildings, on the street below can be seen the real pursuit of Mary by the crowd. The same model was used in another take, with the addition of several abutments and a skyway, on which a model car runs, while on the street below, 2 real worker gangs plod past each other. To achieve this effect, a mirror mounted at 45 degrees in front of the camera lens reflected the image of the miniature model positioned directly behind the camera. Part of the mirror surface had been scratched away so as to provide the camera an unrestricted view of the real scenery. The lower floors of the buildings around the central square of the workers' city were constructed to full scale. The upper floors were mirror image models. In the Stadium of the Suns, the track and lower portion of the wall, 10 meters high, were real. The section above, with buttresses and a dome in the background, were a mirror image of the model, 1/20th of the simulated size. In Rotwang's house, the memorial to Hale. The head was a model 60 centimeters in height, a mirror image of which was projected above the headless pedestal, which, when taking a reverse angle shot of Rotwang flitting by the memorial, was used as a platform for the crew and camera. The third special effect used for Metropolis, multiple exposure. Not copying one on top of the other, subsequently in the laboratory, but actually during the shoot, in the camera, on the same reel of film, which had to be rewound several times.
Günter Ritter, der hat mir auch in Metropolis unendlich geholfen. Und vor allem bei der Erschaffung des künstlichen Menschen, wo ein Mensch aus einem Robot geschaffen wird, aus einem metallenen Robot. Und er hat das so großartig gelöst, dass man mich heute in Amerika noch fragt, wie habt ihr das eigentlich gemacht?
The same piece of negative was exposed up to 30 times. We first shot the mechanical person on the pedestal. The figure was then replaced by a black silhouette, and around this figure 2 circular arched neon lights in tubes made from sandwich paper were moved up and down repeatedly by a type of elevator, filmed through a glass plate, which was smeared with a thin layer of grease. Finally, the electrical discharges were filmed, without the greased glass plate.
Sets have become architecture, says Buñuel. Costumes and makeup become sculpture.
Schulze-Mittendorf. The figures were actors wrapped in a layer in a gothifying style, made out of thick, hard and wired jute. Their heads were encased in a full mask, made from a new, malleable wood material which had just appeared on the market. The material could be sawn, grated, filed and planed.
The futuristic mechanical person is made from the same material.
Brigitte Helm had to be able to sit, stand and walk in the costume. A plaster mould of the helmet was constructed, onto which I directly attached the body, which could be broken down into several parts, the same principle as for knight's armour.
The Metropolis music was composed, unusual for the time, during the filming. Huppertz had already written the Nibelungen music. The Metropolis music is dominated by leitmotifs, to which characters, groups of characters, and even particular content have been assigned. For example, as it is called by the composer, the motif of the epigram. Or the opening titles music. Mechanically rhythmic ostinato figures accompany the machine scenes. Two dances are assigned to specific settings, the Yoshiwara and the Eternal Gardens. After the magnificent premiere at the Uferpalast am Zoo, the film runs at a 600-seat cinema, whose facade is silver-plated and adorned with a golden gong. The film is seen there by 15,000 people. Then the distributor withdraws the film. When the film is re-released 6 months later, its length, following the example of the American version, has been reduced by 1/4. Paramount commissioned playwright Channing Pollock with the task of editing the film. In his autobiography, he makes fun of the mechanical woman through which Rotwang wants to give new life to his dead love.
The story was of an inventor who, widowed and not liking it, built for himself a second wife constructed of steel. She must have been, I should think, an uncomfortable bedfellow on winter nights.
The adapter builds a different story into the film, one which can be told using the available shots.
Not a very original story, based on the Frankenstein theme.
Pollock turns the rival of Fredriksson, whom he calls Masterman, into his faithful assistant. It's not clear, though, why he's so angry about it. It is also puzzling as to why Rotwang endows the mechanical man, who is meant as a robot to replace the workers, with female attributes. How do we know what these scenes looked like in the version screened at the premiere? One source is Huppert's musical score, to be exact, the bandmaster's copy. It contains keywords for the conductor to allow him to conduct the music synchronous to the images and titles. For the scene in Rotwang's house, the following is written. But then, for this and in the further keywords, the images are missing in the existing versions. That could be this. Another document providing insight into the original version is the censorship certificate, which contains the text of the titles. We read for the third reel of film, this has no equivalent in the score. A mind like yours. This was a keyword in the score. This too I have forgotten only once. A still explains the keyword memorial pedestal in the score and shows the text reproduced on the censorship certificate. Another still shows the memorial with the head of Hale. If we also study the surviving screenplay, we understand other keywords in the score as well. This explains Curtain Up. Fredriksson Close Up, the score said. The text of the titles we know from the censorship certificate. How they must have looked, a surviving torso of the shortened German version tells us. Thus we can imagine the sequence. Metropolis and other failures force Ufer to forge a connection with the nationalist Hugenberg's Shell Corporation. Lang formed his own company, which produced his last two silent films. The first, Spies, a thriller along the lines of Dr. Mabuse, again with Kleinruger. The second, The Woman in the Moon, pure science fiction, not a mixture with other genres as in Metropolis. A trip to the moon. Von Harbu had envisioned this already for Metropolis. Freda and Mary were supposed to leave the Earth and fly into space with a spaceship. Three years and two Lang von Harbu films later, their first sound films, world economic crisis, unemployment as well as political and economic backers bring an admirer of Lang's to power. Goebbels, his propaganda chief, told Lang that after attending a screening of Metropolis, Hitler said he wanted its director to create the National Socialist Cinema.
Reichsminister for Economy and Agriculture, Hugenberg, the boss of Ufer.
Goebbels banned M and the Testament of Dr. Mabuse, but continued to offer Lang a great future.
As Lang remembers later,
1933. Es muss im März oder Anfang April gewesen sein. Goebbels bot mir die Führerschaft des deutschen Films an. Dann ging ich am selben Abend nach Paris. Ich wollte nicht mehr nach Deutschland zurückkommen. Und von Paris nach 3/4 Jahren nach Amerika. In Paris.
Lang directed 21 films in Hollywood for MGM, Paramount, Fox, Universal, Columbia. Usually never more than 2 consecutive films for the same company. Then 3 more in Germany, the last in 1960, The Thousand Eyes of Dr. Mabuse.
The elements criticized in the 20s aided the revival of Metropolis from the 1980s onwards into the new century, the mixture of genres, styles and time levels. That there is no clear line between past and future, that antiquity and Middle Ages provide models for the future. That the city of the future doesn't broaden systematically, but instead grows wildly to delirious heights in a small space. That it sees political and economic power in a single hand, and does not envision the two in liberal opposition, the mega-city as a company's empire. That associations are made between science and magic, enlightenment and myth. That it allows a man to dream of recreating his lover which fate has taken away from him as a replicant. That it fails to present a modern, realistic image of the plight of the workers, and instead gives a metaphorical picture based on the early age of capitalism. That it generally favours similes, metaphors and allegories over confidence in the sensual perception and rational analysis of the outside world. That as the only remedy for dissolving contradicting class interests, it offers an appeal to the goodwill of the social partners.